Let's talk about having directives communicate with controllers. So we'll set up an app and let's just, call it like a tweeter app, or we'll just say Twitter app. And from there, we would have a controller, ng controller, we'll just call it app controller. And from here, we would have some sort of behavior attached to a div, and we'll call this behavior enter. We'll make it like we did before. And we'll just say load more tweets. So basically, on enter, we'd want to load more tweets off of the app controller. Now, some people would think, oh, I'll just inject a service into my directive, or I'll wire up things through scope or whatever. But basically, you can use a syntax that would look like this: load tweets, and you can invoke this on the app controller from the directive. And let me show you how to wire that up instead of just talking about it. So Angular module, Twitter app, and no dependencies. And then let's do app, we'll add our controller, which we called app controller, and pass in the scope, and the scope load tweets. And we'll just say loading tweets. We'll talk about using the HTTP service and things in later videos. So our controller is now, when you invoke that load tweets function, it's just going to alert load tweets. Don't really need to show that. So we'll call this directive enter, and then it'll be a function which returns a function. And this function has our scope, element, attributes. Just kind of get used to that syntax, set up a template for it. I type it out just to make sure everything's clear. And from here, we'll do the same element bind, mouse enter. And so on mouse enter, when the mouse goes in there, we're going to do a little trick. Because it's still attributes enters where we're going to want to get that this load tweets method from. And so once we pass, what we're going to do is pass in a service called parse, which will be able to know what this actually is. So we can say parse attributes enter, and then invoke it using the scope. So this will know what the scope is. This will turn this into a function, and that should work. So now once I roll over, it'll say loading tweets. Maybe to make this more clear, I can break this out into the function inside of enter, if that helps you understand a bit more, and then invoking it by passing in the scope. Now this scope is the same scope that's in the app controller. We have not isolated it from the app controller. We'll get into that more later. But right now, if you just parse that expression, parse that method into something you can invoke, you can pass in the scope, and then anytime you roll over, you could load more tweets. So again, let's look at the HTML, because I think the HTML is very expressive, and that's the goal here, is that you can tell exactly what's going on just by reading the HTML. So load tweets, which is defined on the app controller, and then we parse that, pass in this, parse that attribute, pass in the scope, and invoke it.